The moment my daughter Victoria slammed the door in my face, telling me I'd never see my grandchildren again, something inside me finally broke. For 45 years, I'd been the one who bent, who compromised, who sacrificed. But standing there, on her porch in the rain, watching the door close on my grandchildren's faces pressed against the window, I decided this would be the last time anyone walked over Eleanor Jenkins. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was barely 20 when I had Victoria. Her father, Matthew, and I were high school sweethearts who married too young, dreaming of building something beautiful together. I still remember how tiny she felt in my arms that first day, how her fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. In that moment, I silently promised her everything, every opportunity, every advantage I never had growing up. My own childhood had been marked by instability. My mother worked 3 jobs after my father left, and we moved constantly, chasing affordable rent across 5 different states. I grew up knowing the particular shame of free lunch programs and secondhand clothes. I swore Victoria would never know that feeling. When Victoria was 3, Matthew's small construction business hit hard times during the recession. Bills piled up, and the tension in our home became unbearable. One morning, I discovered he'd cleared out our joint savings account, $4,300, every penny we had, and disappeared. The note he left simply read, "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." Suddenly, I was 23 with a toddler, no money, and an eviction notice. That's when I made my first major sacrifice. I dropped out of college, just 2 semesters shy of my teaching degree. My mother offered to let us move in with her, but her 1-bedroom apartment in Chicago wasn't big enough for 3 people. Instead, I took Victoria to Maplewood, a small town where housing was cheap, and found work as an administrative assistant at Westridge Academy, a private elementary school. The salary barely covered our needs, but the position came with a crucial benefit: a significant discount on tuition. Victoria could attend a prestigious school that would otherwise be completely out of reach for us. The headmistress, Mrs. Abernathy, took a particular interest in me. She was a stern, imposing woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes, but beneath her formal exterior lay unexpected kindness. "You have potential, Eleanor," she told me one afternoon, finding me crying in the supply closet. After Victoria had been invited to a classmate's birthday at an expensive horseback riding camp we couldn't afford. Life has dealt you difficult cards, but how you play them will determine everything. Over the next 15 years, I worked tirelessly at Westridge. I started as a receptionist, but gradually took on additional responsibilities: organizing events, managing enrollment, coordinating with teachers, even filling in as a substitute when needed. Mrs. Abernathy became my mentor, teaching me every aspect of running the school. My salary improved modestly, but we still lived frugally in our small 2-bedroom apartment. Victoria thrived at Westridge. She was bright, popular, and ambitious. Everything I'd hoped she would become. When she was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship, I felt vindicated. Every sacrifice had been worth it, but I still couldn't afford the remaining tuition. That's when I made my second major sacrifice. I sold my mother's house after she passed away. She'd managed to buy a small home just before her retirement, and it was meant to be my inheritance, my safety net. Instead, I liquidated it to fund Victoria's education. "Mom, are you sure?" Victoria had asked, her acceptance letter still clutched in her hand. "That's all you have." "I'm sure," I said, hugging her tightly. "This is your future. Nothing is more important." At Princeton, Victoria met James Harrington, the son of a banking executive. Handsome, charismatic, and born into privilege, James represented everything Victoria aspired to: stability, social status, affluence. I was genuinely happy for her when they got engaged during their senior year, even as I noticed subtle changes in my daughter. Her phone calls became less frequent, her visits home shorter. She began making comments about our apartment, our furniture, even the way I dressed. "Mom, you should really update your wardrobe," she said during one holiday visit. "These clothes make you look older than you are." I didn't tell her that I still shopped at thrift stores, that I'd been making payments on her student loans in secret, determined she would graduate debt-free. After their graduation, Victoria and James married in a lavish ceremony that his parents insisted on hosting at their country club. I felt painfully out of place among the Harringtons' wealthy friends, aware of my discount store dress and costume jewelry. Victoria introduced me briefly to her new in-laws, then spent the remainder of the evening circulating among James's connections. "Eleanor," Mrs. Harrington said when we were momentarily alone, her eyes assessing me over her champagne glass. "Victoria, tells us you work at some little school?" "Westridge Academy," I said. "I've been there for almost 20 years now." "How dedicated," she replied, her tone making the word sound like a character flaw. "Though I imagine the pay is dreadful. If you ever need help—" "I'm quite comfortable, thank you," I interrupted, mustering my dignity. She smiled thinly. "Of course you are." As Victoria and James settled into married life in their upscale neighborhood, I saw her less and less. When she announced her first pregnancy, I was overjoyed. A grandchild, a new chapter, a chance to heal the growing distance between us. Emma was born on a crisp October morning. I took an unpaid leave from work to help during those first few weeks, cooking, cleaning, and caring for the baby while Victoria recovered. But rather than bringing us closer, this time revealed just how far apart we'd grown. "Mom, you're not sterilizing the bottles properly," Victoria scolded one evening. "And please don't use those old swaddling techniques. We follow the Harrington method now." The Harrington method, I would learn, referred to the parenting philosophy espoused by James's mother, who had published a self-help book on the subject. Victoria treated these guidelines as gospel, dismissing my own experience as outdated and provincial. When my leave ended, Victoria hired a professional nanny, a young woman with a degree in early childhood development and an impressive resume. I was relegated to occasional weekend visits, where I watched from the sidelines as my granddaughter grew. 2 years later, Victoria had twins, Olivia and Alexander. I again offered to help, but Victoria gently declined. "The nanny has it covered, Mom. Besides, you need to focus on work. Aren't you trying to save for retirement?" I was indeed. At 62, I should have been preparing to step back from full-time work, but my finances had never recovered from funding Victoria's education. Each month, I put aside a small amount, knowing it wouldn't be nearly enough. What Victoria didn't know was that Mrs. Abernathy had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving behind a remarkable gift. For 2 decades, she had been quietly investing on my behalf, building a fund that had grown to nearly $7 million, and she had named me as her successor, not just to this fortune, but to ownership of Westridge Academy itself. "Eleanor has been the heart of this institution," her will stated. "She understands what Westridge truly means to this community, and I trust her to carry its legacy forward." When the lawyers informed me, I was stunned. Mrs. Abernathy had always lived modestly, giving no indication of her substantial wealth. I learned she had inherited a chemical patent from her late husband that had generated millions over decades. I kept this information private, partly out of respect for Mrs. Abernathy's own discretion, but also from a desire to see how people would treat me if nothing appeared to change. I continued living in my apartment and driving my 10-year-old car. The only person who knew was my lawyer, Benjamin Waters, who helped me establish the necessary legal frameworks to assume ownership of the school. "You realize you could retire immediately," he said during one of our meetings. "Travel the world, buy a mansion, never work another day? I shook my head. The school is Mrs. Abernathy's legacy. I won't abandon it. What I didn't say was that my modest lifestyle had become a habit, a comfort. Without Victoria and her family, my work at Westridge was the center of my life. The students, teachers, and parents formed a community that valued me for my contributions, not my bank account. As the twins approached school age, Victoria and James faced a decision about their education. Westridge Academy had the best reputation in the area, but there was a 3-year waiting list for admission. Victoria called me one evening, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mom, I was wondering if you might have any connections at Westridge? The twins need to start kindergarten next year, and we really want them at the best school." It was the first time in years Victoria had acknowledged that my position might be valuable. I felt a glimmer of hope. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I might be able to help," I said carefully. "Let me see what I can do." I arranged for Victoria, James, and the twins to tour the school the following week. They were greeted by the new headmaster, Dr. Reynolds, whom I had personally selected after Mrs. Abernathy's passing. He was unaware of my ownership, believing I was simply a longtime administrative director. "The Jenkins twins," he said warmly, reviewing their application. "I see your grandmother has been with us for quite some time, Mrs. Harrington. We always appreciate our Westridge family connections, but I'm afraid our waiting list policy is quite strict." Victoria's smile faltered. "Surely there must be some flexibility. My husband's family makes substantial donations to educational institutions." Dr. Reynolds glanced at me, then back to Victoria. "We evaluate all applicants on the same criteria, regardless of potential donations. However," he added, noting her disappointment, "we do have a legacy consideration for children of alumni. As Ms. Jenkins' daughter, your children would qualify." Relief washed over Victoria's face. She barely acknowledged my role in this exception, instead launching into questions about the curriculum and facilities. As they toured the campus, I noticed how at ease the twins seemed, especially Emma, now 5, who trailed behind with me. "Grandma," she whispered, slipping her small hand into mine, "do you work here all the time?" "I do, sweetheart," I replied. "Then I want to come here," she said decisively. "We could have lunch together every day." Her words warmed my heart, but I knew better than to expect such simple pleasures. Victoria and James lived by a carefully orchestrated schedule, and spontaneous grandmother-granddaughter lunches wouldn't fit their plan. The twins and Emma were enrolled at Westridge the following semester. I deliberately kept my distance during school hours, respecting that this was their space. Occasionally, I would glimpse them on the playground or in the hallways, and they would wave excitedly. These small moments sustained me. For nearly 2 years, we settled into a comfortable rhythm. Victoria became involved with the Parents Association, organizing fundraisers and volunteering at school events. During these functions, she would acknowledge me cordially, sometimes even inviting me to join their family for dinner afterward. I began to hope that Westridge might bridge the gap between us, providing common ground where we could rebuild our relationship. But I was unprepared for how quickly everything would unravel. The catalyst was, ironically, a school fundraiser, a bus day charity auction to renovate the library. Victoria had been appointed chair of the planning committee, a position that elevated her standing among the wealthy Westridge parents. The event was held at the Harrington Country Club, transforming the ballroom into an elegant auction venue. I attended in my capacity as administrative director, wearing a simple black dress I'd owned for years. Victoria was resplendent in designer evening wear, moving confidently among guests who represented the city's elite. I hung back, helping where needed but careful not to intrude on her moment. During the live auction, A bidding war erupted over a luxury vacation package. Victoria's mother-in-law, Margot Harrington, raised her paddle repeatedly, clearly determined to win. When the bid reached $15,000, she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eleanor, aren't you going to bid? Oh, that's right. This is probably beyond your means." Several nearby parents chuckled. I felt my face flush but maintained my composure. "The school appreciates all contributions, large and small," I replied evenly. Victoria witnessed this exchange but said nothing, her smile frozen in place. Later, as the event wound down, I overheard her speaking to Margot in a quiet corner. "I'm so sorry about that," Victoria was saying. "Mom's always been, well, you know. That administrative job is the best she could do after dropping out of college. She means well." Margot patted her arm. "Darling, you've risen above your circumstances admirably. No one would ever guess your background, the way you carry yourself now." I slipped away before they could see me, a painful knot forming in my chest. That night, I made a decision. After nearly 3 decades in the shadows, it was time to step into the light as Westridge's owner. The following Monday, I would meet with my lawyer to prepare the announcement. But before I could implement this plan, disaster struck. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was James, his voice tight with anger. "Eleanor, what the hell have you been telling the twins about? Victoria's childhood?" Confused and still half asleep, I struggled to understand. "Nothing, James. What are you talking about?" "Alexander came home yesterday talking about how his mommy used to be poor, how you sacrificed everything so she could go to fancy schools. He said his teacher told him you were a true hero who gave up your education and future for your daughter." My heart sank. The previous week, Westridge had held a Family Heroes event where students shared stories about inspirational relatives. Alexander's teacher, Ms. Winters, was a longtime colleague who knew my history with Victoria. "James, I didn't put Alex up to this. The children were asked to talk about family members they admire." "Save it," he cut in. "Victoria is humiliated. Do you have any idea what this does to our standing in the community? Her mother-in-law heard about it at her book club this morning." "It's the truth, James," I said quietly. "I don't see why Victoria should be ashamed of where she came from." "Because it's not the narrative we've established," he snapped. "Victoria has worked hard to build the right connections, the right image. We don't need your working class hero story undermining that." Before I could respond, I heard Victoria's voice in the background, demanding the phone. "Mom," she said, her voice cold and controlled, "I trusted you with my children's education, and this is how you repay me? By turning them against me? By making me look like some charity case?" "Victoria, sweetheart, I don't want to hear it. I've spent my entire adult life trying to distance myself from that apartment, from watching you count pennies at the grocery store, from the pitying looks when other mothers realized you were a single parent." Her words cut deeper than any knife. "You're ashamed of me," I whispered. "I'm ashamed of how you're using my children to boost your ego," she retorted. "Well, it stops now. The twins and Emma won't be returning to Westridge, and until you learn some boundaries, you won't be seeing your grandchildren at all." The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still clutched in my hand, as the weight of her words crashed over me. My own daughter had just excised me from her life, and worse, from my grandchildren's lives, because I represented a past she wanted to erase. For 3 days, I moved through my routine like a ghost. I called Victoria repeatedly, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I drove to their house, only to find no one answered the door, though cars were clearly in the driveway. I even tried contacting James's office, but was told he was unavailable. On the 4th day, Dr. Reynolds called me into his office. His expression was grave. "Eleanor, I've received a strongly worded email from the Harringtons. They're withdrawing their children from Westridge, effective immediately. Moreover, they're threatening legal action against the school and specifically against Ms. Winters for what they're calling inappropriate disclosure of private family information to other students. I sank into a chair. They can't be serious. Alexandra simply shared that his mother grew up with less advantage than he has. How is that grounds for a lawsuit? They're claiming defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, he said, sliding a printed email across the desk. According to this, Victoria Harrington has built her social and professional reputation on certain assumptions about her background. They believe Ms. Winters deliberately undermined that narrative. Reading through the legal threats, I felt something shift inside me. For decades, I had protected Victoria, sacrificed for her, remained silent when she gradually erased me from her narrative. And now, she was not only cutting me off, but threatening the school that had given her every advantage. Dr. Reynolds, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I believe it's time I shared something with you. Over the next hour, I explained my true relationship to Westridge Academy, that I was not merely an administrative director, but the owner and primary benefactor of the school. I showed him the legal documentation and outlined the circumstances of Mrs. Abernathy's bequest. His astonishment gave way to understanding. So all these years, you've allowed everyone to believe you were just an employee? Even your own family? I wanted to be valued for my contributions, not my bank account, I explained. And frankly, I wasn't ready for how it might change people's perceptions. And now, I took a deep breath. Now I think it's time for the truth. All of it. That afternoon, Benjamin Waters arrived at Westridge to help formulate our response to the Harringtons' threats. We drafted a carefully worded letter, revealing my ownership of the school and dismissing their legal claims as baseless. I should deliver this personally, I told Benjamin. Victoria needs to hear this from me. He looked concerned. Eleanor, are you sure? This might escalate the situation. I'm done hiding, I said firmly. For 30 years, I've lived in the shadows to protect Victoria's pride. Look where that's gotten me. With the letter in hand, I drove to the Harrington residence. This time, when no one answered the doorbell, I didn't retreat. Instead, I sat on the front steps, prepared to wait as long as necessary. After 20 minutes, the door finally opened. Victoria stood there, her expression a mixture of anger and surprise. Mom, what are you doing? I told you we need space. Space is one thing, I replied, standing up. Threatening legal action against people who have only ever supported you is another. She glanced nervously at the neighboring houses. You shouldn't be here. If you don't leave, I'll have to call. The police? I finished for her. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd be interested to hear how you're planning to sue a school for allowing a child to express admiration for his grandmother. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand what's at stake here. James's mother is on the board of the country club, the symphony, the children's hospital. Our social standing affects everything. The twins' future connections, James's business prospects. I can't have people looking at me like what, Victoria? Like someone who overcame challenges? Like someone whose mother worked herself to the bone to give her every advantage? What exactly are you ashamed of? I'm not having this conversation on my front porch, she hissed, then reluctantly stepped aside. 5 minutes. Inside, the house was immaculate, a showcase of wealth and taste. Photos of the children lined the hallway, but I noticed none included me. We entered the living room, where James was working on a laptop. He closed it immediately, his expression hardening, when he saw me. Victoria, I thought we agreed. It's fine, she interrupted. Mom was just leaving after she says whatever she came to say. I handed her the letter. This is the official response from Westridge Academy to your legal threats. I suggest you read it carefully. Victoria tore open the envelope and skimmed the contents, her face paling with each paragraph. When she reached the revelation about my ownership, she looked up, disbelief written across her features. "This can't be real," she whispered. You own Westridge? The entire school?" James snatched the letter from her hands, his eyes widening as he read. $7 million? Your mother has been sitting on a $7 million fortune while we've been paying full tuition? "Mrs. Abernathy left me more than money," I said quietly. "She left me her legacy, her vision for what education should be. A vision I've upheld for nearly a decade now, without anyone realizing who was really signing the checks." Victoria sank onto the sofa, her carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known I had money? Would you have stopped being ashamed of where you came from, of who I am?" She had no answer. "For 30 years, I've watched you distance yourself from me, from your roots. I've stood by while you crafted a narrative that erased every sacrifice I made. I kept silent when you implied to your in-laws that I was some sort of failure. And now, you've banned me from my grandchildren's lives because a 7-year-old expressed pride in his grandmother." James cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We never intended to cut you off permanently. We just needed some boundaries." "Save it, James," I interrupted. I heard Victoria clearly, and now I'm setting some boundaries of my own. The lawsuit against Westridge ends here. The children are welcome to return to school. In fact, I'll personally guarantee their places. But this pretense ends today. I turned back to Victoria, whose eyes were brimming with tears. "I've spent my life trying to give you everything, Victoria. I sold my only inheritance so you could attend Princeton. I've lived in the same apartment for 20 years so you could graduate debt-free. I kept my ownership of Westridge private because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I have." "Mom, I didn't know," she began. "You didn't want to know," I corrected gently. "It was easier to reimagine your background than to acknowledge that your opportunities came at a cost, my cost." Victoria wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we tell the truth, all of it. To your children, to the Harringtons, to everyone. No more hiding, no more shame. And maybe, if we're honest with each other, we can build something real." I turned to leave, pausing at the door. "The children have a family history project due next week at Westridge. If they're returning, perhaps you could help them with it. The real history this time." As I walked to my car, the front door opened again. I expected Victoria or James, but instead, it was Emma, running down the steps in her pajamas. "Grandma, wait," she called, throwing her arms around my waist. "Are you coming back?" I knelt, down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I never left, sweetheart. And I never will." Looking into her eyes, so like Victoria's, so like my own, I saw the future unfolding with new clarity. The truth, however uncomfortable, had finally set us all free. Behind Emma, Victoria stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, but she didn't call her daughter back inside. Instead, she watched us, perhaps seeing for the first time what had always been there, the unbreakable thread that connected 3 generations of women, stronger than pride, stronger than shame, stronger even than betrayal. It was a beginning. The week following my confrontation with Victoria and James was eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, no further legal threats. I carried on with my duties at Westridge, while privately finalizing the paperwork to officially declare my ownership. Benjamin Waters, my attorney, urged caution. "Once this becomes public, everything changes," he warned during our meeting. "You've lived anonymously for so long, Eleanor. Are you prepared for the attention, the questions, the people who'll suddenly want to be your best friend?" I smiled wryly. At 62, I'm a bit old for new best friends, Benjamin. Besides, I'm not announcing this to become a local celebrity. I'm doing it because I'm tired of shadows. He nodded, understanding passing. Between us. Benjamin had been handling my legal affairs since Mrs. Abernathy's passing. He knew better than most how carefully I'd guarded my privacy, how deliberately I'd avoided drawing attention to my financial situation. "We'll issue the press release Monday morning," he said, sliding the finalized document across his desk. "I've arranged for Dr. Reynolds to hold a staff meeting first thing, so your colleagues hear it from you rather than the news." That Friday afternoon, I sat alone in my modest office at Westridge, surrounded by 30 years of memories. Photographs of graduating classes lined the walls. Thank you cards from parents and students filled a bulletin board. In one corner stood a small bookshelf with yearbooks dating back to when Victoria first enrolled. I pulled out her senior yearbook, flipping to her class photo. Victoria Harrison, most likely to succeed. Her smile was confident, radiant with possibility. I traced my finger over her face, remembering the girl who used to fall asleep with her head on my lap while I reviewed enrollment paperwork late into the night. Somewhere between that moment and now, I'd lost her. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Looking up, I was startled to see Emma standing in my doorway, still wearing her school uniform, though classes had ended hours ago. "Emma, what are you doing here, sweetheart? Where's your mother?" She shuffled into the office, clutching a worn purple backpack. "Mom doesn't know I'm here. Ms. Peterson was having after-school art club, and I told Mom I wanted to stay. Then I snuck over to find you." My heart clenched. Victoria would be furious if she knew Emma had sought me out against her explicit instructions, yet I couldn't turn my granddaughter away. "Come sit down," I said, patting the chair beside my desk. "Does your mom know where you are now?" Emma shook her head, her eyes downcast. "She's picking me up at 5. That's in 20 minutes. "We should call her," I began, reaching for my phone. "No!" Emma exclaimed, her eyes filling with tears. "Please, Grandma, I just wanted to see you. Everyone says we're not coming back to school here, and you're not allowed to come to our house anymore. And I don't understand why." I sighed, setting down the phone. Sometimes adults have disagreements that are complicated to explain. Is it because Alexander said you were poor? Mom got really mad when he said that. Out of the mouths of babes. I chose my words carefully. Your mother and I have different ideas about what's important to share about our family history. It's not about being poor or rich. It's about understanding where we come from. Emma considered this, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Well, I think it's cool that you helped Mom go to college and everything. That's what Alexander told me. He said his teacher said you're a hero." Despite everything, I smiled. Ms. Winters is very kind, but I was just being a mom. That's what parents do. They try to give their children the best opportunities they can. Then why is Mom so mad about it? How to explain social climbing to a 7-year-old? How to articulate the complex shame Victoria felt about her origins? I settled for a simpler truth. Sometimes people want to focus on where they're going, not where they've been. Your mom has worked very hard to build the life you have now. Emma kicked her feet thoughtfully against the chair leg. But you're part of where she's been, right? So does that mean she doesn't want you in where she's going? The innocent question pierced straight through me. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't disparage Victoria, Emma continued. Olivia and Alexander and me, we decided we don't want to go to a different school. We like it here, and we really, really miss you, Grandma. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of apple shampoo and childhood. I miss you too, sweetheart. More than you know. We sat together for a few minutes, Emma showing me her latest art project, a family tree she'd been working on for class. I noticed she'd placed my name prominently near the top, with a heart drawn around it. Such a small thing, yet it filled me with warmth. "Grandma," she said suddenly, looking up at me with serious eyes, "if you owned a whole school, would you let kids see their grandmas whenever they wanted?" I blinked, taken aback by how close her hypothetical struck to reality. "I suppose I would, yes." She nodded solemnly. "That's what I thought. Grown-ups should be more sensible." A buzz from my phone interrupted us. A text from the front office. "Victoria Harrington has arrived early to pick up Emma Peterson. She's quite agitated, saying Emma isn't at art club." My stomach dropped. "Emma, we need to get you to the front office right away. Your mom is here looking for you." Her lower lip trembled. "Am I in trouble?" "Let me handle it," I assured her, taking her hand. "Just remember that your mom loves you very much, even when she's upset." We walked quickly through the empty corridors, Emma's small hand clutching mine tightly. As we rounded the corner, to the reception area, I spotted Victoria pacing frantically, her phone pressed to her ear. "Search the entire campus if necessary," she was saying. "My daughter is 7 years old. She can't just vanish." She turned, seeing us, and her face transformed from panic to fury in an instant. She ended her call and strode toward us, high heels clicking aggressively against the tile floor. "Emma Catherine Harrington, do you have any idea how worried I've been? The art teacher said you never showed up to her class." Emma shrank against my side. "I'm sorry, Mom. I just wanted to see Grandma." Victoria's gaze snapped to me, her eyes narrowing. "So you've been with her this whole time? After I explicitly told you?" "Victoria," I interrupted firmly. "Emma sought me out on her own. The moment I realized you didn't know where she was, I was bringing her to find you." "Don't," she hissed, grabbing Emma's wrist and pulling her. "Away from me. Don't you dare act like you're being reasonable now. You've been undermining me at every turn." "That's not true, and you know it." "Isn't it? First you allow that teacher to turn my children against me with stories about my difficult upbringing. Then you encourage Emma to disobey me by coming to see you behind my back." "Mom, ow," Emma whimpered. "You're squeezing too hard." Victoria immediately loosened her grip but maintained her stern expression. "We're going home now, Emma. Say goodbye." Emma looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "Bye, Grandma." "Goodbye, sweetheart," I said softly. "Remember what I told you." As Victoria marched Emma toward the exit, I called after her. "Victoria, please, this doesn't have to be this way. Whatever issues are between us, don't let them affect the children." She paused at the door, her back rigid. Without turning around, she replied coldly, "You'll be hearing from our attorney. We're filing for a restraining order." After they left, I sank into one of the reception area chairs, trembling slightly. A restraining order. My own daughter wanted legal protection from me, as if I were dangerous. The reception secretary, Mrs. Diaz, approached cautiously. "Ms. Jenkins, are you all right?" I nodded mechanically. "Fine, thank you, Rosita. Just a family disagreement." She hesitated, then said gently, "Family is complicated. My mother and I didn't speak for 3 years after my divorce. Now she babysits my children every weekend." "What changed?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "We both finally admitted we were more important to each other than being right." I pondered her words as I drove home that evening. Was that what this conflict with Victoria had become? A battle to be right? Had I been so focused on defending my choices that I'd lost sight of what really mattered? The weekend passed in a blur of preparations for Monday's announcement. Benjamin called twice to confirm details for the press release. Dr. Reynolds emailed the staff meeting agenda for my review. Through it all, I moved as if underwater, my thoughts continually circling, back to Victoria's threat of a restraining order. Sunday evening, as I was reviewing my notes for the staff announcement, my doorbell rang. Checking the peephole, I was shocked to see James standing in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. I opened the door cautiously. James? Eleanor? He nodded stiffly. May I come in? I stepped aside, allowing him into my apartment. His eyes swept over my modest living room, the secondhand furniture, the faded curtains, the ancient television. Nothing had changed since Victoria lived here as a teenager. Victoria doesn't know I'm here, he said, declining my offer to sit. If she found out I came to see you, especially after what happened with Emma. I understand, I replied, though I didn't. Why would James, who had always followed Victoria's lead in family matters, suddenly defy her by coming here? He paced the small space, hands thrust deep in his pockets. I need to understand something, Eleanor. This letter from your lawyer, about you owning Westridge, is it legitimate? Yes, I said simply. Every word. So you've had millions of dollars all this time. It wasn't a question. Since Mrs. Abernathy passed, yes. James shook his head incredulously. And you've been living in this place? Driving that beat-up car? Working as a school administrator when you could have been on a beach in Bali? I never wanted Bali, I replied. I wanted purpose. Mrs. Abernathy gave me that along with the money. But why keep it secret? From everyone? From your own daughter? I gestured for him to sit, feeling suddenly tired of standing. This time he complied, perching awkwardly on the edge of my sofa. Do you know what it's like, James, to wonder if people value you for yourself or for what you can give them? I watched Victoria change when she entered your world, how she gradually adopted your family's values, their judgments, their dismissal of where she came from. I wanted to know if that change was permanent, or if somewhere inside she still remembered what really matters. James flushed, defensive. My family welcomed Victoria. Your family tolerated her, I corrected gently. They accepted her because she was willing to erase her past and embrace their standards of success. Tell me, if Victoria had insisted on acknowledging her background, our financial struggles, my single motherhood, this apartment, would your parents have been so accommodating? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Now, I continued, imagine if I had suddenly announced I was worth millions. How would your family have treated me then? Would I have become acceptable overnight? Would Victoria's unfortunate history have been reframed as an inspiring tale of perseverance? James had the grace to look uncomfortable. You make us sound shallow. Not shallow, James. Human. We all want to belong. Victoria found belonging in your world, but the price was pretending to be someone she wasn't, someone who had no connection to poverty, to sacrifice, to this apartment. I chose not to pay that price. He was quiet for a long moment, studying his hands. Finally, he looked up. Victoria is filing for that restraining order tomorrow. She's convinced you're trying to turn the children against her, to make her look bad in front of the Westridge community. And what do you think? I asked. His expression was conflicted. I think Victoria has spent so long constructing this perfect image that she can't bear any cracks in the facade. And I think I've enabled that because it was easier than challenging her. Why are you telling me this, James? He stood, straightening his jacket. Because tomorrow, everything changes. Once your ownership of Westridge becomes public, Victoria's narrative collapses completely. She won't just be the daughter of a school administrator. She'll be the daughter who rejected her wealthy mother, who threatened legal action against her own family legacy. I hadn't considered how my announcement would affect Victoria's social standing. Would it make things worse? Would it drive her further away? The restraining order, James continued. It won't just keep you from the children. It will keep you from the school while the children are present. Victoria knows what she's doing. She's trying to force you to choose between your relationship with your grandchildren and your role at Westridge. My blood ran cold. She can't do that. I own the school. Ownership doesn't override a court order, Eleanor. And Victoria has my mother's entire social network behind her. Judges, lawyers, influential community members. The Harringtons protect their own. Are you threatening me, James? He shook his head wearily. I'm warning you. There's still time to find another way through this. What way? Continue hiding? Pretend I have no connection to my grandchildren? Allow Victoria to erase me from their lives because I'm an inconvenient reminder of where she came from? No, he said, surprising me. But maybe there's a compromise, a way for Victoria to save face while allowing you back into the family. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Delay your announcement. Give me time to work with Victoria to help her see that embracing your true background, your success story, could actually enhance her standing, not diminish it. The wealthy philanthropist who worked her way up from nothing, who chose purpose over luxury. That's compelling, Eleanor. People respect that narrative far more than they respect inherited privilege. And if she refuses to see it that way? James reached into his pocket and withdrew a small USB drive, placing it on my coffee table. This contains documentation of every major donation the Harrington family has made to Westridge over the past 7 years. Substantial donations, Eleanor. My father is particularly proud of the new science wing that bears his name. I stared. At the drive, understanding dawning. You're giving me leverage. I'm giving you options, he corrected. I love Victoria, but she's wrong about this. The children need their grandmother. And frankly, they need to understand that success isn't just about projecting the right image. It's about integrity, hard work, and sometimes sacrifice. After James left, I sat holding the USB drive, turning it over in my hands. It felt wrong, somehow like a betrayal, to use the Harringtons' financial information as ammunition against Victoria. Yet, wasn't that exactly what she was doing to me? Weaponizing my past, my choices, my relationship with my grandchildren? I barely slept that night, weighing James's suggestion against my planned announcement. By morning, I'd made my decision. I dressed carefully in one of my few good suits, applied minimal makeup, and drove to Westridge earlier than usual. Dr. Reynolds was already in his office, reviewing his notes for the staff meeting. He greeted me warmly, offering coffee and a sympathetic smile. Big day, he said. Nervous? A bit, I admitted. But it's time. As faculty and staff began gathering in the conference room, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I would face it honestly. No more shadows, no more half-truths. The room quieted as Dr. Reynolds called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming early this morning. As you know, Westridge Academy has undergone significant changes since Mrs. Abernathy's passing. Today, we have an important announcement about the school's leadership and future direction. He nodded to me, and I stepped forward, scanning the familiar faces of colleagues I'd worked alongside for decades. Ms. Winters, Alexander's teacher, gave me an encouraging smile, unaware of the storm her innocent class project had unleashed. For nearly 30 years, I began, I've had the privilege of serving Westridge Academy in various capacities, from receptionist to administrative director. What many of you don't know is that when Mrs. Abernathy passed away 8 years ago, she named me as her successor, not just as an administrator, but as the owner of Westridge Academy itself. A ripple of surprised murmurs swept through the room. Ms. Diaz, the receptionist who had comforted me after Victoria's visit, gasped audibly. Mrs. Abernathy believed in me when I was a young single mother struggling to provide for my daughter. She created opportunities for me when others saw only limitations. When she ultimately entrusted me with her legacy, I chose to honor that gift by continuing her work quietly, without drawing attention to my changed circumstances. I paused, making eye contact with various staff members. Today, that changes. Effective immediately, I am formally assuming my role as owner and chairperson of Westridge Academy's Board of Trustees. Dr. Reynolds will continue as headmaster, with my full support and confidence." The room erupted in applause, faces showing various degrees of shock, delight, and confusion. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward again, distributing copies of the press release that would be going out later that morning. As the meeting continued with logistical details, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Benjamin. "Harrington lawyers just filed. Emergency hearing scheduled for 2 p.m. today." They'd moved faster than expected. Victoria wasn't waiting to see what I would do. She was striking first. I excused myself from the meeting, stepping into the hallway to call Benjamin. "How bad is it?" I asked without preamble. "Not good," he replied. "They're claiming emotional distress to the children, alleging you've engaged in a pattern of undermining Victoria's parental authority, and asking for a temporary restraining order pending a full hearing. Can they get it?" "The temporary order? Possibly. The judge assigned to the case plays golf with William Harrington." Of course he did. James had warned me about this. The Harrington Network, the influence they wielded in our community. "What are our options?" Benjamin hesitated. "Counterfile, obviously. We have a strong case. There's no documented history of conflict between you and Victoria. No evidence you've ever been anything but beneficial to the children's welfare. But Eleanor, this gets ugly fast. Family court is brutal, and everything becomes public record." I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. In a few hours, my ownership of Westridge would be common knowledge. Shortly after, my family's private conflict would become courthouse gossip. Victoria and I would be formally adversaries, our relationship dissected by judges and lawyers. "There has to be another way," I murmured. "If you want my honest opinion," Benjamin said gently, "the best solution would be to resolve this privately, before the hearing. Once the court gets involved, positions harden, and reconciliation becomes much more difficult." I thanked him and ended the call, my mind racing. Resolve this privately? How, when Victoria wouldn't even speak to me, when she was actively trying? To legally bar me from my grandchildren's lives? Back in the conference room, the meeting was wrapping up. Colleagues approached to congratulate me, express surprise, ask questions about my plans for Westridge. I answered mechanically, my thoughts elsewhere. As the room emptied, Dr. Reynolds approached with concern. "Eleanor, is everything all right? You seem distracted." I considered confiding in him, but decided against it. My family drama shouldn't become school business, at least not yet. "Just processing the change," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been my secret for so long. It feels strange to have it in the open." He nodded understandingly. "Well, for what it's worth, I think Mrs. Abernathy would be proud. You've honored her vision while creating your own legacy here." His words sparked something in me. A memory of one of Mrs. Abernathy's favorite sayings. "Education isn't just about what we learn in classrooms, Eleanor. It's about what we learn from living." What lesson was I teaching my grandchildren through this conflict? What were Victoria and I modeling about family, about conflict resolution, about grace? I checked my watch. The press release would go out in 30 minutes. The court hearing was in 5 hours. In between, my life, and Victoria's, would irrevocably change. Making a sudden decision, I pulled out my phone and called James. "I need to see Victoria," I said when he answered. "Before the press release, before the hearing, just the two of us." "She won't agree to that," he replied. "Tell her I'll cancel the announcement. Tell her I'll sign whatever she wants regarding Westridge. Tell her." I paused, swallowing hard. "Tell her I'll give her what she's always wanted, freedom from her past. But I need to see her first, one last time." There was a long silence. "I'll try," he finally said. An hour later, I sat in my office, the press release temporarily suspended, awaiting word from James. My colleagues were confused by the delayed announcement, but Dr. Reynolds had covered admirably, citing last-minute legal details. Just as I was losing hope, my phone rang. Victoria. "Mom," she said, her voice tight. "James says you want to meet." "Yes," I confirmed. "Just you and me. No lawyers, no accusations. Just a mother and daughter trying to find a way forward." "There is no way forward," she said flatly. "You've made that impossible." "Victoria, please, before you shut the door completely, hear me out. One conversation, that's all I'm asking." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. I can meet at noon at the cafe across from your lawyer's office. I have the hearing at 2, so this needs to be brief." "Thank you," I said, relief washing over me. "I'll be there." The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Just before noon. I chose a table in the corner, away from windows and other patrons. Victoria entered precisely at 12, her expression guarded. She wore a tailored suit and pearls, court attire, I realized. She was taking this hearing very seriously. "Victoria," I greeted her, resisting the urge to reach for her hand. "Thank you for coming." She sat stiffly, placing her purse on the table between us like a barrier. "James said you'd cancel the press release. Has that been done?" "Temporarily postponed," I clarified. "The rest depends on our conversation today." Her mouth tightened. "I don't see what there is to discuss. You kept your wealth a secret while watching me struggle to maintain our standing in James's world. You allowed the children to hear stories that undermine my position as their mother. You've created chaos in our lives, and now you're threatening to publicly embarrass me by announcing you own the very school I just withdrew my children from. What exactly is your goal here, Mom?" The bitterness in her voice stung, but I forced myself to listen without becoming defensive. "My goal, Victoria, has always been the same. To see you happy, to be part of your life and the children's lives. That's all." "Then why the secrets? Why let me believe you were barely getting by all these years? Do you know how many nights I lay awake worrying about your retirement, feeling guilty that I couldn't help you more? Was that some kind of test?" I hadn't considered that angle, that my hidden wealth might have caused Victoria genuine concern for my welfare. "It wasn't a test," I said quietly. "After Mrs. Abernathy died, I needed time to adjust to my new circumstances. By the time I felt ready to share the truth, you were so embedded in the Harrington world, so different. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she demanded. "Afraid that if you knew I had money, it would be the only thing you valued about me. Afraid that the Harringtons would suddenly find me acceptable, not because I was your mother, but because I was wealthy. Afraid that money would become the only language left between us." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "That's not fair. I've never cared about money for its own sake." "Haven't you? You married into wealth, Victoria. You adopted their values, their judgments, their way of life. When Emma asked me why you were angry about Alexander mentioning our past, do you know what she said? She asked if you were ashamed of where you'd been, if that meant you didn't want me in where you were going." Victoria flinched. "She's 7. She doesn't understand." "Children understand more than we give them credit for. They see the truth we try to hide, that you've spent years constructing a narrative that excludes me, that denies your origins, that pretends you emerged fully formed into the Harrington world." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes wavered. "Isn't it? Then why threaten legal action when Alexander mentioned I helped put you through college? Why ban me from the children's lives for being honest about our history? Why file for a restraining order to keep me away from my own school?" Victoria stared at her hands, her composed facade cracking. "You don't understand what it's like," she whispered. to always feel like you don't quite belong, to know people are judging you, looking for evidence that you're not really one of them. Every time the children mention where I came from, every time they talk about their grandmother who works at the school, I see the looks, the whispers. My heart ached for her. Victoria, those people aren't worth your energy, let alone your identity. Easy for you to say, she snapped, defensive again. You don't have to navigate their world. Your life is simple, straightforward. I almost laughed at the irony. My life has never been simple, Victoria. I've spent 30 years walking a tightrope, trying to give you everything without making you feel indebted, trying to be present without being intrusive, trying to matter to you for who I am, rather than what I can provide. Tears filled her eyes, surprising me. Victoria rarely showed vulnerability, especially in public. I never asked you to sacrifice everything, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I never wanted you to put your life on hold for me. I know you didn't, I said gently. But that's what mothers do. We make choices for our children, hoping they're the right ones. Sometimes we get it wrong. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, careful not to smudge her makeup. So, where does that leave us? I have lawyers waiting, a court hearing in 2 hours. You have a press release ready to announce you own Westridge. We're on a collision course, Mom. It doesn't have to be that way, I said, reaching into my bag. I withdrew a folder and placed it between us. This contains 2 documents. The first is a formal agreement transferring ownership of Westridge Academy to a nonprofit educational foundation. The second names you as the foundation's executive director, with full authority over the school's operations and finances. Victoria stared at the folder, visibly stunned. What are you saying? I'm saying Westridge can be yours, Victoria. You can reshape it according to your vision. You can ensure the twins and Emma receive the best education possible. You can build a legacy that honors both your past and your future. Why would you do this? She asked suspiciously. Because I'm tired of fighting. Because I want my grandchildren in my life. Because despite everything, you're my daughter, and I believe in you. She opened the folder hesitantly, scanning the documents with growing astonishment. There's no catch? No conditions? Just one, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. Drop the restraining order. Allow me to be a grandmother to the children, on whatever terms make you comfortable. I won't interfere with your parenting. I won't contradict your decisions. I just want to be present in their lives. Victoria closed the folder, her expression unreadable. And if I refuse? I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the line I had decided I would not cross. Then the press release goes out at 1 o'clock. By the time we reach the courthouse, everyone in this town will know that you're seeking to legally bar your mother, the owner of Westridge Academy, the woman who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities, from seeing her grandchildren. You're blackmailing me, she said, her voice hollow. No, Victoria. I'm fighting for my place in this family. For the first time in 30 years, I'm putting myself first. She was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder. Finally, she looked up, a complexity of emotions in her eyes. You know what's ironic? All these years I've been trying to prove myself worthy of the Harrington name, to show I belonged in their world despite where I came from, and now it turns out my own mother has more wealth, more influence than they do. I smiled sadly. Money isn't power, Victoria. Love is. That's what I've been trying to tell you all along. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse and the folder. I need to think. I need to talk to James. The press release is scheduled for 1, I reminded her gently. Victoria nodded, already reaching for her phone. I know. You'll have my answer. Before then. As she walked away, I felt a curious mixture of hope and despair. I had finally stood my ground, finally spoken my truth. But at what cost? Would Victoria see this as an opportunity for reconciliation or the ultimate betrayal? 45 minutes later, my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my heart in my throat. "I've instructed my lawyer to withdraw the petition," she said without preamble. "The hearing is cancelled." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you, Victoria." "Don't thank me yet," she replied, her voice carefully controlled. "I've reviewed your proposal. I have some amendments." "I'm listening." "First, I want you to remain involved with Westridge, not as an employee, but as founder and chairperson emeritus of the foundation. Your experience, your connection to Mrs. Abernathy's vision, the school needs that." I was genuinely surprised. "You want me to stay?" "Second," she continued, ignoring my question, "I want a formal family dinner once a week. The children miss you. Emma hasn't stopped crying since I told her she couldn't see you anymore." "Victoria..." "Third," her voice softened slightly, I want us to try again. Not just for the children's sake, but for ours. I've been angry for a long time, Mom. Angry that you sacrificed so much. Angry that I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Angry that I felt caught between two worlds. But I'm tired of being angry. Tears welled in my eyes. "I'm tired too, sweetheart." "So, no press release," she said firmly. "No dramatic public announcements. We do this quietly, privately. A family matter, not a community spectacle. Can you agree to that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "That's all I ever wanted." There was a pause. Then Victoria added, almost tentatively, "The Harringtons are hosting a benefit for children's literacy next month. As the new executive director of the Westridge Foundation, I'd need to attend. Would you consider coming as my guest?" I understood what she was offering, a public reconciliation, an acknowledgement of our connection in front of the very people she'd once hidden me from. "I'd be honored," I said simply. "Good," she replied, her businesslike tone returning. "I'll have my assistant send you the details. And Mom?" "Yes?" "Wear something nice, not that beige suit you've had since I was in high school." I laughed, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I think I can manage that." After we hung up, I sat for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. The restraining order was withdrawn. Victoria had accepted my offer, with revisions that suggested she wanted me in her life, not just the children's. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that we might find our way back to each other. I called Benjamin to relay the developments, then Dr. Reynolds to cancel the press release permanently. As I was leaving the cafe, my phone chimed with a text from Victoria. "Emma wants to know if you'll come over for dinner tonight. Can you make it?" I smiled, typing my response with suddenly trembling fingers. "I'll be there. Tell her Grandma can't wait to see her." Outside, the spring afternoon was unexpectedly beautiful, cherry blossoms dotting the trees, sunlight warming the pavement. As I walked to my car, I thought about Mrs. Abernathy, about the legacy she had entrusted to me, about the lessons I had learned through this painful journey. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in what we possess, but in what we're willing to give away. Sometimes the most important truth is the one we've been afraid to speak. And sometimes the path back to family lies through letting go of the very things we thought we needed to hold on to. Victoria and I had a long road ahead. Years of misunderstandings and hurt feelings to navigate, new boundaries to establish, a relationship to rebuild. But for the first time, I believed we would walk that road together, side by side rather, than worlds apart. That evening, I stood on Victoria's doorstep with a small bouquet of daisies, Emma's favorite, and a nervous flutter in my stomach that reminded me of first dates and job interviews. The door swung open before I could ring the bell, and Emma launched herself into my arms. Grandma, you came, she exclaimed, squeezing me with surprising strength for a 7-year-old. Of course I did, sweetheart, I said, hugging her back. I promised, didn't I? Behind her, the twins peered curiously from the foyer. Alexander waved shyly, while Olivia maintained a more cautious distance. At 5, they were still forming their own personalities. Alexander thoughtful and observant. Olivia fiercely independent. Come in, Mom, Victoria called from somewhere inside. We're just setting the table. The Harrington home was exactly as I remembered it. Immaculate, tastefully decorated, and utterly impersonal. The kind of house featured in design magazines, where everything matched perfectly, but revealed nothing about the people who lived there. The only signs of life were the children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator and a scattered trail of toys leading from the living room to the stairs. Victoria emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron over her designer clothes, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered. You brought flowers, she observed, her tone neutral but not unfriendly. The kids can put them in water. Emma eagerly took the daisies. I'll do it. I know where the blue vase is. As the children disappeared into the kitchen, Victoria and I faced each other in the foyer, the afternoon's confrontation still hanging between us like an unfinished conversation. Thank you for inviting me, I said simply. She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture from childhood she'd never quite outgrown. James is working late. He sends his regards. I wondered if that was true, or if James had tactfully recused himself from this first tentative family. Dinner. Either way, I was grateful for the chance to focus on Victoria and the children without navigating his presence as well. Can I help with anything? I offered. Victoria hesitated, then shrugged. Actually, yes. The pasta sauce needs stirring, and I'm still finishing the salad. In the kitchen, Emma was carefully arranging the daisies in a cobalt blue vase while the twins set the table with plastic plates decorated with cartoon characters, a sharp contrast to the formal china I'd seen Victoria use for dinner parties. Grandma's going to help with dinner, Victoria announced, and I noticed a subtle shift in the children's demeanor, a relaxing, as if my acceptance into this domestic scene had been officially sanctioned. As I stirred the simmering sauce, Victoria worked beside me, chopping vegetables for the salad. We moved around each other with the awkward dance of people relearning familiar choreography, occasionally bumping elbows or reaching for the same utensil. I haven't cooked for myself in ages, I admitted, tasting the sauce. It's usually just microwave meals or takeout. Victoria frowned. That's not healthy, Mom, especially at your age. My age? I laughed. I'm 62, not 82. She had the grace to look embarrassed. You know what I mean. You should take better care of yourself. The concern in her voice, however clumsily expressed, touched me. When was the last time Victoria had worried about my well-being rather than how I reflected on her? I'll keep that in mind, I said, adding a pinch more oregano to the sauce. Though, I might need some cooking lessons. You've become quite the chef. Victoria's expression softened. James's mother insisted I learn, said no Harrington wife served store-bought meals. And did you enjoy learning? I asked carefully. She considered this, as if the question had never occurred to her. Actually, yes. There's something satisfying about creating a meal from scratch, seeing everyone enjoy it. Like your father's lasagna, I said without thinking. Remember how he used to spend all day on Sundays making it? The whole apartment would smell like garlic and basil. I instantly regretted mentioning Matthew. Victoria rarely spoke of her father, and I'd learned long ago not to bring him up. But instead of shutting down, she surprised me. I do remember, she said quietly. That and his horrible singing while he cooked. What was that song he always played? The one about New York? Billy Joel, I supplied, relieved. He was obsessed with New York State of Mind. played it until the neighbors complained. Victoria smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. God, I haven't thought about that in years. As we carried the food to the table, I wondered if this was what healing looked like. Small, shared memories gradually rebuilding the bridge between us. Dinner itself was chaotic in the way only meals with young children can be. Emma regaled me with elaborate stories about school projects and playground politics. Alexander asked thoughtful questions about my work at Westridge, while Olivia mostly observed, occasionally whispering comments to her mother. "Grandma," Alexander said suddenly, during a lull in conversation. "Are you rich now?" Victoria nearly choked on her water. "Alexander, that's not an appropriate question." "It's okay," I assured her, turning to my grandson. "That's a complicated question, Alexander. I have more money than I used to, but that doesn't necessarily make someone rich." "But you own our school," he persisted, his 5-year-old mind grappling with this concept. "Mom said you're going to be the boss of the whole place." "Your mother and I will be working together," I clarified, glancing at Victoria. "She'll be running the foundation that owns the school, and I'll be helping." "So you're both bosses," Emma concluded logically. "That's good. Mom's really good at being the boss." Victoria laughed, tension easing from her shoulders. "Thank you for that ringing endorsement, Emma." "Will you still work at the front desk?" Alexander asked me. "I like seeing you when we come in." The innocent question hung in the air. Victoria and I hadn't discussed specifics about my future role at Westridge. Would I maintain my daily presence or transition to a more behind-the-scenes position? "We haven't worked out all the details yet," Victoria answered before I could, her tone deliberately light. "But Grandma will definitely still be at Westridge." After dinner, Victoria suggested I help Emma with her homework while she supervised the twins' bath time. It was such a normal, domestic arrangement that I felt a lump form in my throat as I followed Emma to the study. "I have to read 20 minutes every night," she explained, selecting a book from a neatly organized shelf. "Mom usually times me, but I bet you won't make me stop if we go over." I smiled at her shrewd assessment. "Let's see how it goes." As Emma read aloud, occasionally asking for help with challenging words, I glanced around the study. Unlike the rest of the house, this room felt lived in, with books stacked on surfaces and children's artwork framed on the walls. On the desk sat several photographs, Victoria and James on their wedding day, the twins as infants, Emma losing her first tooth. And there, almost hidden behind a stack of files, was a photo I'd never seen before. Victoria at her Princeton graduation, arms wrapped around me, both of us beaming at the camera. I was wearing the beige suit she'd teased me about earlier, my hair still mostly brown then, my face younger but unmistakably proud. That she had kept this photo, displayed it in her private workspace, struck me as more significant than any of our conversations that day. When the children were finally settled, in bed, Victoria and I found ourselves alone in the living room, each nursing a glass of wine. The evening had gone better than I could have hoped, but the fragile peace felt like ice in spring, solid enough to walk on, yet liable to crack under too much pressure. "The children are wonderful," I said, breaking the silence. "You're doing an amazing job with them." Victoria sipped her wine. "It hasn't been easy, especially with the twins. The first 2 years I thought I might lose my mind from exhaustion." "You could have called me," I said quietly. "I would have helped." "I know," she admitted, "but I wanted to prove I could do it on my own. Well, not alone. We had the nanny, but without falling back on your old life," I finished. For her. Without acknowledging where you came from. She didn't deny it. After Princeton, after marrying James, I felt like I'd finally escaped, like I could reinvent myself completely. No more secondhand clothes, no more financial aid forms, No more pitying looks from classmates when they realized I lived in that tiny apartment. The hurt must have shown on my face because Victoria quickly added, "I'm not blaming you, Mom. I know you did your best. But I wanted more for my children. Stability, security, social standing. And you thought I would threaten that?" Victoria stared into her wine glass. "Not intentionally. But every time the children mentioned you, every time they talked about their grandmother who worked at the school office, I could see the questions forming. Why wasn't their grandmother retired? Why didn't she live in a nice house like their other grandparents? It complicated the narrative. "Life is complicated, Victoria," I said gently. "Children understand that better than we think." She sighed. "Maybe. Or maybe I was protecting myself more than them. It's easier to move forward when you're not constantly reminded of the past." "Is that why you pulled away? After college? After the wedding?" "Because I reminded you of a life you wanted. To forget?" The question hung between us, heavier than all our earlier negotiations about Westridge and the foundation. This was the heart of it, the slow, gradual distancing that had culminated in today's confrontation. Victoria set down her glass, her fingers tracing the stem absently. "Partly," she admitted, "but it was also guilt. Every time I looked at you, still working that same job, still living in that same apartment, I felt responsible, like my opportunities had come at the cost of your future." "That was my choice," I reminded her. "I never regretted it." "You should have," she said, suddenly fierce. "You should have demanded more, for yourself, from me. Instead, you just kept sacrificing, kept accepting less than you deserved. It made me angry, Mom. Angry that you wouldn't stand up for yourself. Angry that you made it so easy for me to leave you behind." Her words hit me like a physical blow. All this time, I'd interpreted Victoria's distance as rejection, as shame over her origins. I never considered that it might be rooted in guilt, in anger at my own compliance with being sidelined. "I thought I was respecting your boundaries," I said quietly, "giving you space to build your new life. I never wanted to be a burden." "You weren't a burden," Victoria said, wiping away an unexpected tear. "You were my mother, the only parent who stayed, and I repaid you by gradually erasing you from my life." "Not completely," I countered. "You kept that photo in your study. From your graduation, I saw it tonight." Victoria smiled faintly. "James wanted me to use a different one for the alumni magazine. Just me in my cap and gown, looking appropriately accomplished. But I insisted on the one with you. It was the happiest day of my life until the children were born. I couldn't imagine commemorating it without you there." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our confessions settling around us like dust after a storm, uncomfortable, but clearer somehow. "So where do we go from here?" I finally asked. "With the foundation, with Westridge, with us?" Victoria straightened, shifting into the practical, solution-oriented mindset I recognized from her childhood, the determined set of her shoulders when faced with a difficult math problem or a challenging essay. "I've been thinking about the foundation," she began. "The more I consider it, the more I see potential beyond what we initially discussed. Westridge has always been an excellent school, but it's also been exclusive, available primarily to families like the Harringtons, who can afford the tuition. Mrs. Abernathy did establish some scholarships," I pointed out. "A handful," Victoria acknowledged. "But what if we expanded that? What if we used the foundation to ensure that at least 30% of Westridge students come from backgrounds like mine was, single-parent households, working-class families, children with potential but limited resources?" I stared at her, astonished. This was the last direction I'd expected the conversation to take. That would significantly impact the operating budget. The Harringtons and their circle might not support such a radical shift. Victoria's jaw tightened in a familiar expression of stubbornness. Let me worry about the Harringtons. James will back me on this, and his father follows his lead more than he admits. Besides, we'll frame it as extending Westridge's legacy, ensuring its relevance for the next generation. You've given this some thought, I observed, intrigued by this glimpse of a Victoria I hadn't seen in years. Passionate, purposeful, unconcerned with appearances. I have, she admitted. Ever since Alexander came home talking about you, I've been thinking about my own childhood, about how different my life might have been without Westridge, without your sacrifices. There are so many children who never get that chance. And you want to provide it? She nodded, leaning forward. Mom, don't you see? This could be our legacy, yours and mine. A way to honor what you did for me by extending that same opportunity to others. Not charity, but investment in potential. The vision she described was compelling, far beyond my own modest hopes for reconciliation. This wasn't just about healing our relationship or securing my place in the children's lives. This was about transforming Westridge itself, making it a vehicle for the kind of opportunity that had changed Victoria's life. Mrs. Abernathy would have loved this idea, I said thoughtfully. She always believed education was the great equalizer. Then let's make it actually equalize, Victoria insisted. Starting with the next enrollment cycle, we'll need to develop criteria for the scholarships, community outreach programs to identify candidates, support systems to ensure these students thrive once admitted. As she outlined her plans, I saw a side of Victoria I'd glimpsed only rarely in recent years. The idealistic, determined young woman who had once written passionate essays about social justice in her Princeton applications. Somewhere beneath the Harrington veneer, that girl still existed. This won't be easy, I cautioned. Change never is, especially in institutions with long traditions. Victoria smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that transformed her face. That's why I need you, Mom. You understand Westridge from the inside out. You've watched it evolve over 3 decades. You know where the resistance will come from and how to address it. We'd be partners then, I said, testing the word. Equals. Yes, she confirmed. No more secrets, no more pretending. Just 2 women with a vision for what education can and should be. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 10, startling us both. I hadn't realized how late it had grown, how absorbed we'd become in this unexpected planning session. I should go, I said reluctantly. It's a school night for the children. Victoria walked me to the door, our steps slower than necessary, both of us seemingly reluctant to end this newfound connection. Speaking of school, she said as she handed me my coat, the children will be returning to Westridge tomorrow. I've already emailed Dr. Reynolds to make the arrangements. They'll be happy about that, I said, thinking of Alexander's earnest questions and Emma's enthusiastic hugs. Especially Emma. Victoria hesitated, then added, I was thinking. The children usually have breakfast with the nanny before school. James and I are typically out the door by 7. But if you wanted to come by some mornings, have breakfast. With them, maybe drive them to school afterward. The invitation, casual as it seemed, represented a monumental shift. Victoria was not only allowing me back into the children's lives, but actively creating space for me in their daily routine. I'd like that very much, I said carefully, not wanting to overstate my reaction and risk her withdrawal. She nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. I'll let Martina know. She's the nanny. She could use the occasional morning off anyway. At the door, Victoria surprised me again by leaning in for a brief, awkward hug. Good night, Mom. Drive safely. Good night. Victoria, I replied, momentarily speechless at this unexpected physical affection. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I felt a curious lightness, as if years of accumulated tension had finally begun to dissolve. The day had started with the threat of a restraining order and ended with plans for a shared mission and breakfast with my grandchildren. Life's strangest turns often came without warning. The following weeks established a new rhythm to my relationship with Victoria and the children. 3 mornings a week, I arrived at the Harrington home by 7:15, letting myself in with the key Victoria had ceremoniously presented to me after our second family dinner. I prepared breakfast for the children, helped them gather their school supplies, and drove them to Westridge, where I'd walk them to their classrooms before starting my own workday. These morning routines quickly became the highlight of my week. Away from Victoria's watchful eyes, the children relaxed completely in my presence. Emma shared gossip about her friends and teachers. Alexander peppered me with questions about everything from dinosaurs to space travel. Even Olivia, initially the most reserved, gradually warmed to me, one day solemnly presenting me with a drawing titled Grandma Eleanor at Work, depicting a stick figure with gray hair sitting at a desk surrounded by smaller stick figures with backpacks. At Westridge, changes were underway. Victoria had thrown herself into the foundation with remarkable energy, scheduling meetings with the board, consulting with financial advisors, and drafting proposals for the expanded scholarship program. Dr. Reynolds, initially cautious about such significant changes, became an enthusiastic advocate after Victoria presented her detailed 5-year plan. The official announcement of the Westridge Foundation was made at a small ceremony in the school auditorium. Victoria insisted I stand beside her at the podium as she outlined the foundation's mission and introduced me as its founding chairperson, Emeritus, a title we'd negotiated that acknowledged my historical role while clearly establishing her leadership going forward. Westridge Academy has always represented excellence in education, Victoria told the assembled parents, faculty, and local press. Today, we expand that commitment to ensure excellence is accessible to a diverse community of learners. My mother, Eleanor Jenkins, has dedicated 30 years to this institution. Her vision, along with that of the late Mrs. Abernathy, will guide us as we enter this new chapter. The applause was polite but reserved, particularly from the section where the Harringtons and their social circle were seated. William Harrington's face remained impassive throughout Victoria's speech, while Margot's tight smile suggested constrained disapproval. Only James applauded enthusiastically, his supportive gaze fixed on Victoria. Afterward, as we mingled with guests at the reception, Margot cornered me by the refreshment table, her diamonds glittering under the fluorescent lights. "Eleanor," she greeted me with artificial warmth. "What an interesting announcement. Victoria seems quite passionate about this project." "She is," I agreed neutrally. "The foundation represents an important evolution for Westridge." Margot's smile didn't waver, but her voice dropped to ensure only I could hear. "I must say, this sudden revelation about your financial situation has been quite the topic of conversation. One can't help wondering why you maintained the pretense of being just an employee all these years." "It wasn't a pretense, Margot. I was an employee, I still am in many ways. The ownership was unexpected, a gift from Mrs. Abernathy that I chose to honor quietly." She murmured, unconvinced. "Well, William and I are concerned about the direction Victoria is proposing. 30% scholarship students would significantly alter Westridge's character, don't you think? The exclusivity has always been part of its appeal." "Times change," I said simply. "Educational institutions must evolve or become irrelevant." Margot's smile tightened further. "Evolution is one thing, Eleanor. Revolution is another. Victoria may not fully appreciate the social implications of what she's proposing. The Harrington name carries certain expectations in this community." Before I could respond, Victoria appeared at my side, her timing suspiciously perfect. "Mother-in-law," she said sweetly, linking her arm through mine. "I see you've been chatting with my mother." "Just sharing some thoughts about your ambitious plans," Margot replied smoothly. William and I have some concerns, which I'm sure you'll outline in your capacity as a donor, Victoria interrupted, her tone pleasant but firm. But educational policy will be determined by the Foundation Board based on our mission and values. Now, if you'll excuse us, Dr. Reynolds is waiting to introduce us to the State Education Commissioner. As Victoria led me away, I whispered, "That was rather direct." She shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. One of the advantages of finding out your mother secretly owns the school is realizing you don't have to placate people like Margot Harrington anymore. Victoria, I admonished, though I couldn't suppress a laugh. She's still your mother-in-law. Yes, and I respect her accordingly, Victoria replied, but I don't fear her disapproval the way I used to. There are more important things than maintaining the right appearance. This new Victoria, confident, purposeful, unconcerned with the Harringtons' social approval, was a revelation. In the weeks following the announcement, she threw herself into implementing the Foundation's initiatives with single-minded determination. She established a community advisory board that included educators from public schools, social workers, and representatives from neighborhoods that had never sent children to Westridge. She commissioned a complete review of the curriculum to ensure it reflected diverse perspectives and experiences. She even started a weekly column in the school newsletter highlighting stories of first-generation college students and educational pioneers. Not everyone embraced these changes. Several prominent Westridge families, including close friends of the Harringtons, withdrew their children in protest of the new direction. The school's wait list was long enough that these spots were quickly filled, but the social fallout was significant. Victoria found herself excluded from charity committees she had once chaired, uninvited from luncheons she had previously attended religiously, removed from group texts organizing social events. "Does it bother you?" I asked one evening, as we worked late in the Foundation office, reviewing applications for the pilot scholarship program. "Being ostracized by your old social circle?" Victoria considered the question, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in that familiar gesture. "Less than I would have expected," she admitted, "though I do worry about the impact on James. He has to work with these people." "And what does James think?" She smiled. "He's been surprisingly supportive. Said he married me for my mind, not my ability to organize galas for his mother's friends. Though I suspect part of him enjoys watching me upset the established order. James has always had a bit of a rebellious streak, carefully hidden beneath that corporate exterior. And the children, have they felt any fallout?" Victoria's expression sobered. "Some. Emma mentioned that Sophia Williams isn't allowed to come to our house for playdates anymore. Apparently, Mrs. Williams feels our family values have become questionable." "I'm sorry," I said, genuinely concerned. "Children shouldn't suffer for adult prejudices." "No, they shouldn't," Victoria agreed. "But it's also a valuable lesson about standing up for what you believe in, even when it costs you socially. That's not something I understood until recently." She fell silent, focusing on the application in front of her, but I sensed there was more she wanted to say. I waited, sorting through my own stack of papers, giving her the space to collect her thoughts. "You know," she finally continued, "all those years I spent trying to fit into the Harrington world, I never really felt like I belonged. I was always waiting for someone to point out I didn't deserve to be there, that I was fundamentally an imposter. Now that some of them have actually rejected me, it's almost a relief. The worst has happened, and I'm still standing." "More than standing," I observed. "You're building something meaningful, something that honors where you came from rather than erasing it." She nodded, a certain peace in her expression I hadn't seen in years. "I wish I'd understood sooner what you tried to teach me, that dignity doesn't come from what others think of you, but from what you know of yourself." The next morning, I arrived at the Harrington home for my regular breakfast duty to find Victoria still there, unusually late for her typically rigid schedule. "Everything okay?" I asked, helping myself to coffee from the pot she'd already brewed. "Fine," she assured me, though her expression was tense. "Just waiting for a call?" "From James. He's meeting with his father this morning about us." "The foundation," I guessed. She nodded, absently straightening Emma's lunchbox on the counter. "William has made it clear he disapproves of the direction we're taking Westridge. He's threatened to withdraw the Harrington family's annual donation, quite substantial, if we proceed with the expanded scholarship program." My stomach tightened. Despite our newfound financial security with Mrs. Abernathy's endowment, losing the Harrington donation would significantly impact our operating budget. That's substantial leverage. "It is," Victoria acknowledged. "But it's also a test, of me, of James, of what we truly value. James is telling his father this morning that while we appreciate the family's historical support of Westridge, we won't be changing our plans based on financial pressure." The implications were enormous. James was effectively choosing Victoria's vision, our vision, over his family's approval and financial support. It represented a profound shift in the power dynamics that had shaped their marriage from the beginning. "Are you concerned about the fallout?" I asked carefully. Victoria's phone rang before she could answer. She glanced at the screen, took a deep breath, and answered. "James? How did it go?" I couldn't hear his response, but Victoria's expression shifted from tension to surprise to something approaching triumph. "He said what? Are you serious?" "No, of course I'm not upset. It's just unexpected." After a few more exchanges, she ended the call and turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You won't believe what just happened. William didn't withdraw the donation. Instead, he's doubling it, specifically earmarked for the scholarship program." "What?" I nearly spilled my coffee. "But Margot said—" "Apparently, William and Margot don't see eye to eye on this," Victoria explained, still processing the news herself. "James says his father was actually impressed by my conviction and entrepreneurial approach to education reform. Said it reminded him of himself when he was building his first company." "So he supports the changes?" "Not exactly," Victoria clarified. "He still has reservations about altering Westridge's exclusive character. But he respects that I'm willing to stake my reputation on something I believe in." According to James, his exact words were, "At least she's fighting for something meaningful, not just another damn charity gala." We both burst into surprised laughter, the tension of the morning dissolving into relief. As I helped the children, with breakfast and school preparations, I watched Victoria move around the kitchen with a newfound lightness, humming under her breath as she packed lunches and signed permission slips. This was the daughter I remembered, passionate, determined, unafraid of challenge. She had been hidden for years beneath layers of social conditioning and Harrington expectations, but she had never truly disappeared. She had simply been waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. Later that day, as Victoria and I interviewed candidates for the new community outreach coordinator position, I found myself studying her profile during a break between appointments. The determined set of her jaw, the thoughtful furrow between her brows, the quick intelligence in her eyes. These were features I'd recognize anywhere, traits that connected us despite our many differences. "What?" she asked, catching me staring. "Nothing," I said, smiling. "Just thinking about how proud I am of you." Victoria's expression softened. "Because of the foundation?" "Because of who you are," I clarified. "The foundation is just an expression of that." She looked momentarily flustered, unused to such direct affirmation. "Well, I had a good teacher." It wasn't quite, "I love you," but from Victoria, it felt just as significant, an acknowledgement of connection, of shared values, of a bond that had weathered decades, of misunderstanding and was finally finding solid ground. As we welcomed the next candidate into the office, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that rainy afternoon on Victoria's porch, facing a slammed door and the threat of a restraining order, to this moment of shared purpose and mutual respect. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but perhaps that made the destination all the more meaningful. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave the office, Victoria appeared in my doorway with an unexpected question. "Mom, how would you feel about moving?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Moving? Where?" The Westridge caretaker's house has been vacant since Mr. Peterson retired last year. It's on campus, just behind the athletic fields, a lovely little cottage with a garden. As chairperson emeritus, you'd be entitled to live there rent-free. It would put you closer to the school and to us. The offer took my breath away. The caretaker's cottage was charming. A 2-bedroom stone house with a wraparound porch and flowering trees in the yard. I'd always admired it when walking the campus grounds. But more significant than the property itself was what Victoria's offer represented. A permanent place for me, not just in the Westridge community, but in her life and the children's lives. "Are you sure?" I asked, not wanting to read too much into the gesture. Victoria nodded, her expression open and genuine. "The children would love having you so close. Emma's already talking about weekend sleepovers at Grandma's cottage. And practically speaking, it would make our morning routines much simpler. The school bus passes right by on its route to campus." "It sounds perfect," I admitted, allowing myself to imagine morning coffee on that porch, weekends gardening with the children, evening walks around the campus I'd called home for 30 years. "Good," Victoria said decisively. "I'll have James draw up the paperwork. We can help you move next weekend if that works for you." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Victoria?" She paused, looking back questioningly. "Thank you," I said simply. She smiled, a full, unguarded expression that reminded me of the little girl who used to run into my arms after school. "No, Mom, thank you. For everything." As I drove home that evening to my apartment, the same one Victoria had grown up in, the one she'd been so eager to escape, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced in years. The circle was closing, but not ending. Rather, it was expanding to include new possibilities, new connections, new understanding. In revealing the truth about Westridge, I had feared losing what little relationship remained with Victoria. Instead, that revelation had become the foundation for something stronger, more authentic than anything we'd built before. Not because of the money or the power it represented, but because it had forced us both to confront the painful truths we'd spent years avoiding. Victoria's shame about her origins, my fear of asserting my own needs, our mutual failure to communicate honestly about what really mattered. The future stretched before us now, uncertain but promising. The Westridge Foundation would face challenges as we implemented our new vision. Victoria would continue navigating the complicated social dynamics of the Harrington world. I would adapt to a new role, a new home, a new chapter in life I hadn't anticipated even a month ago. But for the first time in decades, we would face these challenges together. Not as the mother who sacrificed everything and the daughter who needed to escape, but as partners in a shared mission, as family rediscovering what that word truly meant. And perhaps that was the most valuable lesson in this entire journey. That sometimes what tears us apart is also what can bring us back together, stronger and wiser for having weathered the storm. 2 months after settling into the caretaker's cottage, life had fallen into a rhythm that still sometimes felt like a dream. My mornings began with the children, breakfast at the cottage 3 days a week, a routine that brought structure to my days and joy to my heart. Emma had claimed the blue ceramic bowl as her special breakfast dish. Alexander insisted his toast be cut into precise triangles. Olivia, still reserved but warming gradually, had developed a fondness for helping me water the cottage garden before school. Victoria's pregnancy was progressing well, though morning sickness had taken its toll during the first trimester. At 13 weeks, she'd finally shared the news with the children, whose reactions were exactly as she'd predicted. Alexander's scientific curiosity, Emma's campaign for a sister, and Olivia's quiet concern, masked beneath careful smiles. Liv, as I'd taken to calling her, had begun spending extra time with me, often lingering after her siblings rushed off to play. One afternoon, as we planted bulbs in the garden for spring flowers, she finally voiced the worry she'd been carrying. "Grandma," she said, her small fingers carefully patting soil around a tulip bulb, "when the new baby comes, will you still have time for me?" The question pierced my heart with its innocent vulnerability. "Of course I will, sweet girl. Grandmas have unlimited love. It never runs out, no matter how many grandchildren there are." She considered this, her expression serious. "Mom will be busy with the baby. Dad, too." "They will," I agreed, "but they'll still love you just as much. And you know what? You'll have a special job as a big sister. That's very important. Alexander and Emma are already good at being big," she said doubtfully. "They don't need me." I set down my trowel, giving her my full attention. "Everyone needs you, Liv. You notice things others don't see. You feel things deeply. That makes you special, not just to me, but to your whole family." She leaned against me, soil-covered hands leaving smudges on my gardening apron. "Can I come here when the baby cries too much?" "Anytime," I promised. "This can be your quiet place whenever you need it." That evening, I shared Olivia's concerns with Victoria, who arrived to collect the children after a foundation meeting. "I've been worried about her," Victoria admitted, watching through the window as the children played on the small swing set James had installed in the cottage garden. "She's so contained, so careful not to make waves. Sometimes I think she believes she has to be perfect to be loved." "I can't imagine where she got that idea," I said dryly. Victoria winced. "Touché. I'm trying to do better with her, with all of them. But old patterns are hard to break." "She needs reassurance," I suggested. "Special time that's just for her, even after the baby arrives." "You're right," Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe we could start now, a regular mother-daughter outing, just the two of us. Something that's entirely hers, not shared with the twins." I smiled, pleased to see Victoria applying the insights she'd gained from our reconciliation to her relationship with her own children. She'd love that. As Victoria gathered the children for the drive home, I marveled at how naturally we'd fallen into this collaborative approach to parenting, sharing observations, offering suggestions, supporting each other's decisions without criticism or judgment. After years of distance, we'd developed a partnership that honored both her role as mother and my perspective as grandmother. The following week brought another significant development, my first official meeting with the Westridge board as the incoming headmaster. Victoria had prepared the ground skillfully, speaking individually with key board members to secure their support before the formal nomination. Nevertheless, I felt uncharacteristically nervous as I entered the boardroom. Dressed in a new suit Victoria had insisted on buying for the occasion. "You can't meet the board wearing that beige thing from the last century," she'd declared, dragging me to an upscale boutique where she selected a tailored navy ensemble that managed to be both professional and flattering. "You need to look the part, Mom." The board meeting went better than I could have hoped. Dr. Reynolds presented the succession plan, emphasizing my institutional knowledge and deep connection to Westridge values. Victoria outlined the proposed partnership between the foundation and school administration, carefully navigating the potential concerns about nepotism by stressing the separate governance structures and accountability measures. When William Harrington, serving his final year as board chair before retirement, raised questions about my lack of academic credentials, Victoria didn't jump to my defense. Instead, she allowed me to address his concerns directly, explaining the proposed partnership with an academic dean, highlighting my hands-on experience with every aspect of school operations, and articulating a vision for Westridge that honored tradition while embracing necessary evolution. "Mrs. Jenkins," William said finally, his tone measured but not unfriendly, "I've been on this board for 20 years. In that time, I've seen 3 headmasters come and go. Each arrived with impressive degrees and extensive administrative experience. Each struggled to truly understand what makes Westridge unique." He paused, adjusting his glasses in a gesture reminiscent of James. "Your approach is unconventional, but so was Mrs. Abernathy's decision to leave you the school. Perhaps what Westridge needs now isn't another academic administrator, but someone who embodies its heart and soul. Someone who has lived its mission from every angle." The board voted unanimously to approve my appointment, effective upon Dr. Reynolds' retirement the following June. As we left the meeting, Victoria squeezed my hand, her expression triumphant. "Even William voted yes," she whispered. "That's practically a miracle." "He sees the value in your vision for the foundation," I replied. "And in your judgment about me." She shook her head, amused. "No, Mom. He sees the value in you. We all do now." The autumn months passed in a blur of preparation for my new role, for Victoria's expanding foundation initiatives, for the baby's arrival in January. The cottage became the heart of our family life, hosting Sunday dinners, weekend, sleepovers, and holiday celebrations. James, initially reserved in these family gatherings, gradually relaxed into a warmer, more playful version of himself, building a treehouse with the children, experimenting with elaborate recipes in my modest kitchen, sharing stories about his own childhood that revealed unexpected commonalities with Victoria's experiences. "I never told anyone this," he confided one evening as we washed dishes after dinner, the children and Victoria engaged in a board game in the living room. "But my family wasn't always wealthy. My father's first business failed when I was 7. We lost everything: the house, the country club membership, my private school enrollment. For almost 3 years, we lived in a small apartment while he rebuilt from scratch." "Victoria doesn't know?" I asked, surprised. He shook his head. "My parents rewrote that chapter of our family history once they regained financial stability. They never discuss it, and I learned early on not to mention it. But those years were actually some of my happiest memories. My mother had to work for the first time, so I had more freedom. Our apartment was in a neighborhood with lots of children. I played outside until dark, made friends based on shared interests rather than social connections." "Why tell me now?" I asked gently. James dried a plate thoughtfully. "Because watching you and Victoria rebuild your relationship has made me reconsider what stories we tell, what truths we honor. I don't want my children, or this new baby, growing up with the sanitized version of our family history that erases all struggle, all resilience." "Have you discussed this with Victoria?" "Not yet," he admitted, "but I will. She's changing, becoming more comfortable with where she came from. I think she might be ready to hear that the Harrington facade isn't as perfect as she once believed." This conversation gave me new insight into James, his support of Victoria's foundation initiatives, his willingness to challenge his parents' expectations, his genuine commitment to raising children with values beyond social status and financial success. There was more depth to him than I'd recognized, more complexity to his relationship with Victoria than I'd understood from the outside. As Christmas approached, the cottage transformed into a festive haven, with handmade decorations created by the children adorning every surface. Victoria, now 7 months pregnant and glowing despite her fatigue, had embraced the holiday with unexpected enthusiasm, reviving traditions from her childhood that I'd assumed she'd forgotten, stringing cranberries and popcorn for the tree, baking cinnamon ornaments that filled the cottage with spicy fragrance, singing the carols we'd once performed as an impromptu duo while washing dishes in our tiny apartment. Remember how we used to ride the bus downtown to see the department store windows? She asked one evening, as we finished decorating the modest tree I'd set up in the cottage living room. We couldn't afford to buy anything, but you made an adventure out of just looking. You loved the animated displays, I recalled, smiling at the memory. Especially the one with the little mice decorating their tree. I thought it was magical, she said softly. I didn't understand then that you were teaching me to find joy in experiences rather than things. That even when we couldn't afford presents, we could create memories. You were always easily entertained, I teased, adjusting a handmade ornament crafted by Alexander, a startlingly accurate replica of the cottage made from popsicle sticks and painted in meticulous detail. I'd like to take the children downtown to see the windows, she said suddenly, to start that tradition with them, even though they've never known what it's like to go without. I think that's a wonderful idea, I agreed, touched by her desire to share this piece of our history with her children. The downtown excursion became a full family outing. Victoria and James, all 3 children, and me, navigating the holiday crowds with thermos containers of hot chocolate and a carefully planned itinerary of window displays to visit. Emma declared, "It the best day ever," while Alexander methodically photographed each display with the children's camera Victoria had given him. Even Olivia emerged from her usual reserve, eyes wide with wonder at the animated scenes. Standing slightly apart, watching Victoria point out details to the children, her arm linked through James, her pregnant silhouette illuminated by the colorful lights, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it momentarily took my breath away. This was the future I had always wanted for her. Not the wealth or social status, but the genuine happiness, the loving family, the confidence to embrace both where she came from and where she was going. "Penny for your thoughts," James said, joining me while Victoria led the children to the next window. "Just gratitude," I replied honestly, "for all of this, for her happiness, for being included in it." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "She was incomplete without you, Eleanor. We all were, though I didn't realize it until recently." The holiday itself brought another surprise, an invitation to Christmas dinner at the Harrington estate, delivered by James but clearly initiated by his mother. "Mom wants to include you," he explained, visibly uncomfortable with the messenger role. "She says it's important for the children to have both grandmothers present for holidays." Victoria was immediately suspicious. What prompted this sudden inclusivity? Mother Harrington has barely acknowledged Mom's existence for 7 years. "I think she's genuinely trying," James said defensively. "Dad's retirement has changed their dynamic. She's less focused on social positioning now that he's stepped back from public life. Or she's realized I'm a permanent fixture now that Mom owns Westridge and I run the foundation," Victoria countered, protectively skeptical. "She can't exactly exclude the headmaster and director from community events anymore." "Does it matter?" "Why?" I interjected. "If she's extending an olive branch, perhaps we should accept it." Victoria studied me doubtfully. "Are you sure? Dinner with Margot Harrington isn't exactly a relaxing holiday experience. There will be formal place settings, multiple courses, strict expectations about behavior, especially the children's." "I think I can manage to use the right fork," I said dryly, "and it would mean a lot to the children to have their whole family together." In the end, Victoria reluctantly agreed, though she spent the days before Christmas coaching me on Harrington, holiday protocols and warning the children about behavior expectations. "Just be yourselves," I told the children on Christmas morning, as they opened presents at the cottage before the scheduled afternoon dinner at the Harrington estate. "Your other grandparents love you just as I do." Emma looked unconvinced. "Grandma Margot doesn't laugh like you do, and she never lets us help in the kitchen." "Different grandmas have different ways of showing love," I explained. Though privately, I wondered if Margot Harrington's rigid adherence to social formalities left much room for genuine connection with her grandchildren. The Harrington home. was exactly as intimidating as I remembered from Victoria's wedding. A sprawling colonial mansion set on manicured grounds, decorated for Christmas with professional perfection. Every wreath, garland, and ornament coordinated in tasteful gold and burgundy themes. Even the gifts under the towering tree were wrapped in matching paper with elaborate bows. Margot greeted us in the foyer, elegant as ever in a cashmere sweater and pearls. Her silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon. To my surprise, she embraced me briefly after welcoming Victoria and James. "Eleanor," she said, her tone cordial if not warm, "thank you for joining our family celebration. The children have been talking about your cottage constantly. Apparently, you've become quite the gardener." "Amateur enthusiasm rather than skill," I demurred. "But the children are wonderful helpers." "Indeed," she replied, her gaze shifting to Olivia, who had quietly moved to stand beside me. "Olivia has always had a particular interest in flowers. Perhaps she gets that from you." Before I could respond to this unexpected acknowledgement of inherited traits, William appeared, ushering us toward the formal living room where pre-dinner drinks awaited. The afternoon unfolded more pleasantly than I had anticipated. The children, initially subdued by the formal setting, gradually relaxed when permitted to play in the sunroom adjacent to the dining room. During dinner, served by staff on china, so fine it was nearly translucent, Margot made visible efforts to include me in the conversation, asking thoughtful questions about my plans for Westridge, and even soliciting my opinion on a community literacy program she chaired. "Your perspective would be valuable," she said, surprising everyone at the table, "given your experience with educational access issues." As dessert was served, an elaborate bûche de Noël that prompted gasps of delight from the children, William raised his glass in a toast that further astonished me. "To family," he said simply, "in all its forms, traditional and unconventional, and to new beginnings." He nodded specifically in my direction, a gesture of inclusion I wouldn't have thought possible months earlier. Later, as Victoria and I helped clear dessert plates despite Margot's insistence that the staff would handle it, my daughter whispered, "What did you do to Mother Harrington? I've never seen her this accommodating." "Nothing," I assured her. "I think she's genuinely trying, in her own way." "Well, it's a Christmas miracle," Victoria declared. "Though I'm not letting my guard down completely. Mother Harrington plays the long game." Perhaps she did, but as the evening continued with carols around the piano and the exchange of final gifts, I observed moments of genuine warmth from both Harrington grandparents, William patiently teaching Alexander a simple piano tune, Margot admiring Olivia's quiet rendition of Silent Night, both of them listening attentively as Emma recounted the downtown window displays with theatrical flourish. When it was time to leave, Margot drew me aside in the hallway, her expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "Eleanor," she began hesitantly, "I owe you an apology. For years I viewed you as, well, as less than us. I judged Victoria's background as a deficit, rather than recognizing the strength it gave her." I waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "Watching you and Victoria rebuild your relationship has made me reconsider many assumptions," she continued. "The foundation she's creating, with your guidance, represents values I've claimed to support but rarely acted upon. The changes at Westridge, opening opportunities to deserving students regardless of background, they're changes I would have resisted a year ago." "What changed your perspective?" I asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Partly the children. They speak about you with such love, such admiration. Partly Victoria herself. She's become more confident, more purposeful since reconnecting with you. And partly my own reflection. At my age, one begins to consider what legacy truly matters. It wasn't a complete transformation. Margot Harrington would always value social standing and traditional markers of success. But it was a beginning, an opening toward mutual respect that might eventually blossom into genuine friendship. As James drove us back to the cottage, Victoria leaned against my shoulder in the back seat. The children dozed beside us, the Christmas lights from neighboring homes casting colorful patterns across our faces. "That went better than I expected," she murmured sleepily. "It's a season of miracles," I replied, embracing the quiet joy of this moment. My daughter beside me, my grandchildren sleeping peacefully, the future stretching before us, filled with possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine 6 months earlier. When we arrived at the cottage, James carried the sleeping twins to the car while Victoria gently woke Emma, who had insisted on staying awake for the drive. "Can't I sleep over with Grandma?" she protested, rubbing her eyes. "It's Christmas." "Not tonight, sweetheart," Victoria said. "But soon, I promise." As they prepared to leave, Victoria lingered on the porch, one hand resting on her rounded abdomen. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." "That's what mothers do," I replied, our familiar exchange now carrying layers of shared understanding, of forgiveness offered and accepted, of love that had weathered estrangement and emerged stronger. Watching their car disappear down the lane, Christmas lights twinkling through the winter darkness, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a resolution. The closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Richer and more beautiful than I could have imagined when Victoria first banned me from my grandchildren's lives. I had given her everything, as mothers do. And in return, she had finally given me the greatest gift of all. Not just access to my grandchildren, but her true self, no longer hidden behind social pretense or shame about her origins. We had both come home at last to the truth of who we were together and the promise of who we might become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.